Well, welcome to the 12th, I believe, in our series of P2 webinars, and welcome back after the summer break that we took in August. We're now back for business, and we'll be doing 2 of these a month for the foreseeable. For those who've not joined one of our webinars before, we'll be talking for about half an hour. We don't unfortunately have time to take questions because of the tight time scale, but we do answer all questions, so do please feel free to write in those questions. And we will of course be providing this as a recorded webinar for everybody who has attended the session, and do feel free to share that with any people who you might find it of interest. We're very pleased to share this far and wide. So look, today we'll be talking about turbocharging your business processes through automation, a topic that I think is incredibly relevant, incredibly interesting at the moment. It's something we're hugely excited here at P2. We'll be taking a quick canter through the subject. So we'll be looking at the why of automation. What are the business challenges, of course? We'll be looking at the what. So what do we mean when we say automation? I'll demystify some of that. We're talking about the how. What's the approach P2 takes to take getting people moving forward on their automation journey, and also actually what might you already have that's going to make your life a lot easier, because I think you'll be surprised how available it is to do when you start. And to help make that come real, we're going to be talking through some of our real world success stories to give you an example of what can be achieved. Before we do that though, for those new to P2, allow me to just very quickly share a bit about us. P2 is the world-leading digital transformation consultancy. We've set up about 7 years ago with a very clear goal, and that's to offer a real alternative to the Big Four. We do that through delivery of our 3 P2 transformation promises to improve, to control, and deliver on your transformation ambitions. We do that through the 12 services you can see below there. Obviously today we're going to do a deep dive into the very first of those services, the service of automation, which, as I mentioned, is something that's very close to our hearts. Before we dive into that though, let me very quickly introduce myself. My name's Adam Skinner. I'm Director of Consulting here at P2, and I'm very glad to be joined by Adrian Mangan. Adrian, who's our Head of Retail Automation. Adrian, over to you.
Great stuff. Thank you very much, Adam. So let's just jump straight in, if we may. So why bother with automation? Well, let's lift the lid on some of the sort of challenges that businesses are facing into today, or the driving forces, as I like to frame them as. We have revenue generation and protecting, and maximising margin. And for those on the call, that clearly that's been more challenging over the last 6 months than it's been for a long time, really. We have a context of rising cost pressures, whether that's fixed costs such as property, staff, assets, run costs, etc., or variable costs such as managing your third parties effectively and efficiently. Now we have productivity and efficiency drives going on in organisations. How do we do more for less? A backdrop of increasing regulatory and compliance, and depending on what industry you operate in, will drive kind of the bar that you need to meet. And depending on whether you're a high process maturity or a low process maturity organisation, has an impact in terms of how you manage that threat. And really another big sort of driving force is around big data analytics, and that's sort of understanding what's going on, and then how you respond, how you act. And many organisations, companies and clients of ours are really sort of focusing heavily on that at this point in time. But then there's other sort of factors, really. The green agenda, which is now starting to have a greater bear on companies, and there's KPIs associated with those. And we've got the impact of COVID-19 and the shift to remote working patterns. And whilst kind of we all know that kind of broadly speaking, that's been kind of relative success, it has meant that we've needed to adjust because we can't do some things in the same way that we did before. And automation has, has got a big sort of part to play in that, believe it or not. And then we have Brexit, which is, back on the agenda, and we're yet to see really what the impact and opportunities are of that. So if we place that in the context of the complexity of the modern organisation, really, you have all of these events occurring at points in time. We've got processes and procedures and ways of working, and all of those manifest themselves into outcomes that happen every single day. And really the interesting bit here that we've been focused on is, particularly from an automation perspective, is looking at all of those internal sort of BAU processes, as well as the transitory ones. And we'll bring these to life in a couple of examples later, really. And how that automation tooling can really sort of alleviate some of the risks that we see manifesting themselves through those driving forces. And really kind of, when we think of this, it's kind of, sometimes, we default to, it's automation, that means it's big and scary, right? But not necessarily so, to be perfectly honest with you. I mean, clearly there are some automation technologies there, and if we look at it from a purist perspective, they talk about fixed and programmable and flexible automation. And for those of us kind of who sort of live and breathe this stuff, we see it in the context of robotic process automation and artificial intelligence and machine learning. But what does that really mean? I mean, our clients are asking us, well, that's great, but what does it mean for our business? What does it mean for me? How can we benefit from it, but also kind of, practically implement it? And so when we talk about this, really, we talk about it in two dimensions. There's one which is around sort of unleashing newness, opening up new possibilities to engage customers, especially digitally. So for those that are on the call, you'll recognize when you're going online and you're buying and you've got a history of purchasing through a particular website, let's say. Then before you know it, really, it's built up a profile for you, the machine learning element has, and knows what to push your way, which increases, the probability of getting a sale. So that's just kind of a simple example of kind of how that machine learning is brought to bear and made sort of not obvious, but I suppose kind of helps organisations drive revenue and understand their customers better. And really, then there's the below the line sort of elements, which is around how we turbocharge business processes, or the touch and flow points. And principally, this has been about augmenting and enhancing sort of workforces through the use of automating repetitive tasks. We've all seen those pictures of kind of, in distribution centres with machines whizzing around all over the place, picking from buckets, etc. And really, kind of, it's that's one end of the extreme. But it's not the only opportunity to go after. And really for today, I think that's kind of the sweet spot that I want to focus on, really. So another sort of question sort of I get asked when I speak to some of my clients is Adrian, does it need to take years and cost us millions of pounds? Which is a great question, really, that I do get asked. And the honest answer to that is, well, it might do. So if you're building an automated national distribution centre, and having gone through that with one of my clients in the past, then the answer to that is probably yes. Well, it absolutely is yes. Similarly, if you're implementing a new CRM solution, with live chat and chatbots, and Einstein technologies, then yes, it will do. But we know that's the case because intrinsically, when we're delivering those types of projects for clients, it has a certain risk profile and a longevity to implement it successfully. But when it comes to some of these automation technologies, it doesn't necessarily need to take kind of years and cost millions of pounds. If you want to pivot to automated workflow, digital decision making, you can do that relatively simply and quickly and cheaply. Similarly, if you want to shift from some of the sort of manual tasks that some of your employees may undertake that take hours currently, then we can super speed those for them to be instantaneous, and taking minutes, and seconds to complete. So really, sort of how we kind of start the journey off in some respects, when we go through this process and we open up those conversations, is about identifying and prioritizing wisely. And typically, what the first things we look for are ones where our target market really is, where there's the ease of implementation. and there's high value associated with going after them. And ideally what we do is to couple that with the business KPIs. So what are the drivers that we can actually measure the success kind of really quickly and, and track against that. And just some of these benefits, and I've just picked out 6 here to really to showcase. I'm not going to talk to each of these, but really if I just look at 2 and we look at compliance, and really that's about how we reduce the threat levels and make sure that we're meeting that bar. So certainly for colleagues that have in P2 who work in fin crime and financial services, and compliance is is really, really important. And obviously the cost of non-compliance is obvious from some of the press cuttings, which people would be aware of. And automation can play a really big part in that, around standardizing those processes, having the information stored digitally and then being able to be retrieved and accessible easily. Similarly, when it comes to improved customer experience, so externally, it could be an increase in your NPS score through some of these automation technologies, but also internally, which sometimes we look at customers internally as well, then that can manifest itself in improved employee satisfaction surveys. And certainly one of the examples that we've got at the end really touches on that powerfully, to be honest, because it was a big pain point within the business. So how do we, we've identified what the opportunities are. How do we sort of release, value early, which is always a big thing that we go after. How do we break this down and say we can kind of deliver that really quickly, demonstrate the value, and then move on to the next thing. Well, here's kind of for those that are on the, this webinar that may have Microsoft 365 product within their business. The licenses for that offers, it's quite exciting, and there's quite powerful capability within that suite of tools, really, which a lot of our clients don't realize is there. So it's not as if they need to kind of invest heavily in order to utilize it. It's kind of it's oven ready, as it were. And really 3 sort of key ones just to bring to life a little bit. There's mobile apps, and we all know what apps are, so I don't need to explain that, but really how we use those apps is building interactive apps with workflow features and functionalities that teams can use on their mobile devices. So if you are working either nomadically, you're in different parts of the buildings, or you're in different sort of counties in terms of where you're working remotely, it's a way of harnessing all of those workflows really simplistically in one place, and is immediate. And when we couple it with the other technologies I'm talking about, is really, really powerful. And then we have data analytics. So this is really around how we use sort of tooling, to unify data from many different sources. So again, this kind of the big data, sort of an understanding of the data analytics, understanding what's going on. So this is a really powerful tool to be able to do that. And the thing that's kind of really, really interesting here is that we can create interactive, immersive dashboards that provide real insight and highly customizable. And then thirdly, there's the workflow automation, really, which is the workhorse. And this is where we have, it's the logic engine which sits behind kind of all of these processes and automates them end to end. And it really is very, very clever and very, very good at replacing manually intensive processes with automated ones. And it just offers some really cool sort of additional functionality about sort of one example here about email auto notification capability or diary management, which we've explored within a couple of our clients and has been really, really useful. They found it exceptionally useful for them. So we've talked about the understanding what the opportunities are, and we've looked at sort of how we quantify the size of the prize. And then we chose the relevant sort of tooling, as it were, that could be applicable in the sets of circumstances. So really, let's now talk about how we land this successfully within clients. And we sort of developed a framework within P2 to be able to do this that's tried and tested, which is, again, distilled this down to absolutely the critical things you need to do in order to get the outcome that you're after. So if we look at this from a step 1 perspective, what do we do? Well, it's, as I've mentioned, it's identifying those real range of opportunities or the pain points from the pool of options. And why do we do that, really? Well, it's, you know, to enable us to make simple and compelling base cases and for improving known issues. So in your business, where something takes too long, where it's too manual, where it's too paper heavy, this kind of like we and you can say to, you know, to the business, well, actually we can take that away, we can simplify it, we can streamline it, we can make kind of, you know, us a better business going forward, and tomorrow better than yesterday. And then we go through steps 3 to 4 or 2 to 4, should I say, to qualify further before we get to step 5. And this really is about launching the minimum viable product, training that out to the users of the solution, and communicating the newness and, you know, the value associated with the business. Part of that also is really about this shift to a continuous improvement mindset and embedding the use of these technologies, you know, into the DNA of the business. Because these aren't just technologies which you just look to use in the context of a transformation program, which is typically the space that P2 operates in terms of delivering, you know, complex, you know, programs of change for clients. But it's also about sort of, you know, the BAU activity, where this is really, really powerful as well. So it works in, you know, on a couple of levels. And the other bit kind of associated with this, which is, you know, you should be aware of, is really, this isn't like a typical project where, you know, you go live and then the business case says in 6 months you'll get kind of like the first return on that investment. With these technologies, actually you derive value from day one. And you do that, plus typically what we've seen, you free up resources to focus, you know, on more value-adding activity within the business. So this is kind of almost how we can go about taking you from idea through to outcome. And part of this is understanding, you know, where it sits within the business as well. So, you know, there's different models. It's not one size fits all. So there's elements of this where it sits within the portfolio office, you know, under myself with other clients. It's federated out into local teams because they have a continuous improvement presence. But actually keeping it alive and moving the organisation to that mindset is kind of, and, you know, and being more agile and responsive to emerging threats and newness is a key part to this, really. And this can set you off on that path. So really, just I'm going to bring Adam in now, if that's okay, because I think there's a couple of success stories here, which would be, you know, just good to talk through. So, Adam, are you there?
Yeah, lovely. So, I mean, thanks hugely for that. And I think now you're going to sort of just try and make this feel a bit real, because I think the point we're really trying to get across with this is it doesn't have to be massive. It doesn't have to be this huge undertaking. In fact, in many ways, aligned to continuous improvement, just having the knowledge and small changes here and there using automation can be incredibly powerful. And I think you pulled out 2 examples that try and get that across a bit. So do you want to just expand a bit on this in this first one you're sharing?
Yeah, absolutely. So I suppose the backdrop here was that we have a couple of our clients where they have a manual process at this point in time, and there's thousands of these that happen kind of on an ongoing basis, really. And a time and motion study was undertaken, and believe it or not, but when you go from end to end in terms of I need to do something to that being executed and you're out the door, there was a 4-hour process, you know, elapsed time between start and finish, and where people are walking around with papers, they're walking up and down stairs, they're trying to find people who may or may not be there before you get to a point where you can actually do what you need to do. So that was really, you know, the context. And, you know, another dimension to that was, you know, once these pieces of paper have been signed, they need to sit somewhere. So all of a sudden you're taking up, you know, a lot of physical space, and, you know, and there's, you know, it's not particularly green. So really kind of that was our starting point to work through, you know, that's the problem statement. How do we bring sort of automation to bear in that context? And just kind of what you see on the screen in front of you is just a snapshot of the tooling that we customized for these clients. And you can see that basically you go in and you can go in either as the person that needs approval for something, the person that approves, or ultimately kind of the final destination of who signs it off before it disappears out of the building. And it's kind of, hopefully for those that are on the call, they can see it's kind of very visual, it's very simple, you can see exactly what it is, and you're typically you're clicking one button in order to go, you know, to obtain that approval. So it's very, very quick. It's very, very simple. It's very, I suppose, intuitive from a user perspective.
Give us a sense of the tools you used, Adrian, to build this. What was there some really complex sort of automated tooling required? Or was it quite simple?
No, so again, with the Microsoft products, we can customize this pretty quickly. So we can go, through from zero to prototyping in around about 2 weeks, let's say, with a view to something which is, ready to go, probably within 4 weeks, let's say, as an average run rate, really. So part of it sometimes is also around defining the process end to end, so you can understand exactly what the flows are that, and the path that things need to take. But again, Adam, I think it's one of those where it was almost like, a light bulb went off when we showed this to people, in those clients, that they didn't realize that basically you could go from 4 hours to 4 minutes and do that relatively seamlessly, and with a tool that is kind of really user friendly, effectively.
And basically, it was just using Microsoft Flow, a bit of Excel, and was it using something called Power Apps as well, or?
Correct. So those 3 technologies that I mentioned earlier around, Power Apps, which is what you can see in front of you, the workflow automation tool, but also the other bit off here, which plays into the data insight piece, was all of this information is also centrally captured back into, in this instance, we use SharePoint. And from there, you can then put Power Apps over the top to actually mine that information. So you can show trend, you can show, frequency, you can identify kind of who, when, how, etc. So it was really, really powerful in that sense, from not having any visibility as to what was happening in the old world, so you're having something which is really, really visible in the new world.
And what I find so excited about this is a really simple business application. It's actually going out into the business, which is not P2's actual heartland, to be fair, going out into the business and helping them do something quicker, more efficient, driving direct value into the business as well from the transformation space, which I think is so very, very powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. And this works whether we're delivering projects and transformation programs. We can apply exactly the same thinking into that context. But you're absolutely right. Where clients have problems, it's our job to do our best to fix them where it's right to do so, and where we can add value, and we can, and we can solve them, jointly. And this is one of those areas where it straddles both kind of BAU and DNA of the business, as well as the transformation space as well. And there's just a few benefits down the right-hand side, which you just mentioned. Now, just picking up on the second one. And similarly, I think this is kind of a very different set of circumstances, really. So this is around a digital transformation program, which is going on in the CX space. And again, this was, for us, this is about data insight, and then being able to make decisions quickly based on what the information is telling us. And there's ways of working which were in place, which we were using, the tool Jira, which is an industry standard. But really, kind of like Jira as a product, whilst it's great in many instances, one of its kind of shortcomings is around kind of the reporting and the insight piece, as it were, and being able to do that dynamically. So what we did was we put the wrapper over the top, which was the data insight piece in the Power BI, to actually bring what was going on to life immediately in real time. And what that has meant, just practically speaking, is that where we have DevOps teams set up, then we can understand quickly and effectively their productivity. We can also click on any of these bars and understand what's happening. So if we've got a big build-up of user stories that it hasn't been pushed down into the next stage of the production cycle, then we can focus effort on getting that done quickly and shifting resources, to get on to, solving that quickly, so that we can really and efficiently manage the digital production line end to end. And what that has meant for, particularly with working third parties and looking to manage costs of those and drive, productivity and efficiency, it's enabled us to have some really powerful conversations, with those parties, to be able to, course correct and make sure work is being done, within the timescales that kind of they're committing to, really. So it's been, for us, it's been really powerful. For the clients, they've been really, really impressed with how they've been able to use that information to have the right conversations, as it were.
So one example that's very much stepping into the business and supporting them and driving video there. One example that's very much focused on the transformation and actually getting more insights and information. Can you just sort of talk maybe for a minute just about where is this knowledge sat? It's very easy to say, look, we did this, but who does this, and what knowledge do they need to be able to do this sort of thing?
Yeah, so typically in this context, this was the embedded sort of digital PMO that we set up to assure this program of work. So they manage Jira along with Scrum Masters, delivery directors, etc. But really, where we've brought the skills and experience to bear in terms of being able to turbocharge the information analytics side of delivery, and really so whilst we've brought that to bear, part of the deal that we have is creating that hybrid team so we can transfer those skills to the clients and enable them to pick these these new ways of working, skills and experience within their teams, build that capability so that we can sort of hand over as well. So really, as always, it's a partnership between ourselves and the clients that we serve to make sure that kind of jointly we get the outcomes that we're striving to achieve.
Brilliant, but quite important to have that kind of centre of excellence, a centre of knowledge that can then go out and support the creation of automation in the business and in the centre. A really nice kind of addition to what you might think of a standard sort of transformational team capability.
Precisely, yeah, and creating that practitioner group, starting off with that squad, and then building these capabilities, and then taking that out in the business to identify the opportunities is absolutely the way to go, and certainly something where in these instances we've done, and we can help other clients who may need that support as well.
So we've got a few more. Do you want to share with us our top tips?
Yeah, so just key points to pick up on, really, just to recap a little bit. So these top tips are around, qualify the drivers for change, identify the right opportunities from the range of possibilities, prioritize them effectively, focus on those ones that are value adding, easy to implement. This piece that we were just talking around starting small but thinking big, and keep that agile mindset, because kind of part of this is actually around how you're going to influence the organizational culture, but you're going to do that with in a different way to potentially how other consultancies may advise clients previously. It's the winning hearts and minds piece around taking colleagues on the journey with you, and that change management piece kind of I'll come to in a second as well. But assembling that task force, creating that capability, having that presence, and then demonstrating value, absolutely a top tip from me. And really choosing the right sort of automation capabilities for the job. And that's kind of going back to that question: is it going to take years and cost millions? Well, you choose the right capabilities for the right set of circumstances, and the answer to that, will be no. And really, just to finish up from me, it's sort of how we can sort of help clients on the call, or potential clients on the call who may be interested in this. Really, as Adam alluded to earlier, just in terms of our improved control, deliver, and commitment to our clients. The three areas that we're sort of touching here really is the automation, which I've mentioned, and those capabilities through those three technologies I mentioned. The analytics, which you couple off the back of that to really sort of surface what's going on, and then what you need to do in order to to face into it or exploit the opportunity. And really, the change management piece is how we sort of operationalize the change and make it sticky. So you get that kind of that interest levels up and curiosity up, and you create that continuous improvement agenda within the business, as it were. So really, that's it from me. I'm going to hand over to Adam now, and he can just finish up. But thank you very much for joining me today.
Great stuff. Thanks, Adrian. Really appreciate it. Well, look, I hope you found that useful. It really is a hugely exciting area, and I think the point we're just really trying to push across here is it doesn't take a huge amount of cash. It isn't something where you have to bring in vast sums of external sort of systems and people. It's just a capability all organizations need to have. It's a skill set like Power BI or Excel that's just really worth getting a grip on. Do feel free to drop us a note if you'd like to talk any more about it. We find this stuff fascinating, as you know. And as I say, we'll be sharing with you after the event the actual webinar. So feel free to share that again. And if you've got any questions, do please come back to us. So that's about it from us. We'll be back in 2 weeks' time with a real deep dive into change management, a really interesting area. How do you make sure what you're building is right for the people you're building it for? Hugely important area. And then a week later, Adrian will be back with us, and he's going to be talking very specifically about turning ideas into digital outcomes. A focus on agile there, really, and actually the really important aspects of end-to-end agile that make it work for retailers. So 2 really interesting webinars we've got coming up. That's it from us. Thanks again. Have a wonderful weekend.